because it's your first dinner, so you don't exactly know how this whole thing goes down. But
No.
this one won't be seated. The goal with this dinner is to try to feel more like a barbecue. So it's gonna be like things over there. You come and you make your own
Okay.
thing. You get your drinks over here. Um, so trying something a little different. Usually it's like long tables seated, but
More casual.
more casual,
Right.
American. You
More
know?
American.
Yeah.
Yes. Are you gonna have paper
Paper plates.
plates?
Yes.
You're gonna
Yes.
have paper
Yes. Yes.
plates?
Yes. Yes.
That's very American to me.
Specifically just to make this more like 4th of July.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, Hi, Noel.
Huh?
How's it going?
It's great. How are you?
It is so good to see you in person and for you to be in town. I jumped on the occasion. I felt like we have so many things to talk about.
We do.
Um, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yes. My name is Noelle, Noelle Perdue. I am a writer and porn historian. We originally met in Montreal. And now I'm kind of based all over the place. But yeah, a lot of my work revolves around writing about legislation, technology, and culture through a lens of pornography and kind of the history of the adult industry and how we interact with it. That's kind of what I'm doing now.
Amazing. Um, One of the things I have to commend you on is how early you are on some trends.
Thank you.
You first wrote about AI chatbot and partners in 2021, which
Yes.
is a very early. They've obviously ballooned in popularity since. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they've sort of popped off since 2021?
I mean, I think that unfortunately the genuine answer is that people are profoundly lonely. And I think that people's inability to connect genuinely with each other is only getting worse. um, Unfortunately, I wish that that wasn't the answer, but I think it is. I think that people are really looking to connect right now and to feel understood and to feel seen. I think that there is obviously well documented loneliness, whether that be the quote unquote male loneliness epidemic or declining birth and partnership rates around the world. But people really are looking for something, and I think that AI chatbots and all of these kind of digital tools act as a bit of a crutch for people, or they can provide a stand-in for however long and make people feel seen and understood. I mean, we're seeing kind of the darker side of that right now with AI psychosis, chatbot psychosis. That's been really interesting to watch.
In 2021, the technology was still rudimentary. You talk about Eliza, you talk about some of these early chatbots being sort of very rote question answer, and now in the age of not only just the LLMs but just so many parameters. There's so much more. There's so much more locations and so eloquent in their answers. Have you updated your model of how you expect this to impact modern relationships now that you've seen how potent they can be?
Definitely. I think that I am in good company with other people that were kind of experimenting with AI, either, creating AI systems, AI art pieces, or writing about it back in kind of 2020, 2021, in that I have really moved away from AI in my own work. I don't use AI at all because I am seeing how people are using it and I find it quite disturbing. And I think that it kind of the way that people are using it to kind of replace human interaction or replace even their own expression with other people, I find disturbs me. For example, I find it really frustrating. For example, when I receive an email that I can tell was written by ChatGPT, especially from somebody who I know has a mostly online job, because to me, in my kind of understanding of things, like, you have a job that is mostly online, you're completely alienated from other people for the vast majority of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the one opportunity you have to connect with somebody, you've chosen not to, and you've actually chosen to put that off onto the machine again. And then you complain about feeling alienated at your work. And I think that that has something to do with itself.
I'm curious, in spite of you not necessarily adopting it for your personal usage, have you seen artificial intelligence enter, say, the porn industry? And if so, in what ways?
Definitely. There are many kind of new businesses trying to capitalize on AI right now, either through chatbots, through kind of like animated, um, digital images that are meant to emulate really popular performers, things like that. So there are, dozens and dozens of those businesses popping up where performers can kind of license their likeness, their personal brand, which has been interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of fear mongering going on around quote unquote AI porn, and the possibility and potential for that to be used non-consensually or to create image-based sexual abuse material. So it's affected the adult industry in so many ways. I think that it's funny watching it as somebody obviously that has been kind of lightly covering artificial intelligence in pornography for many, many years, because to me, I think I'm less worried about it than people expect me to be, because in my perception, the kind of audience for AI or generated content is not necessarily the audience that would be purchasing content from studios or creators. To me, generated content and the audience for that is more similar to the audience for sex dolls or hentai, or the concept of generated images is not new, and it's always been a little bit of a niche. And similarly, I think that although we are seeing kind of this really mainstream boom of novelty around people's it has kind of piqued people's curiosity, and a lot of people are engaging with it because of that, because it's kind of the new thing right now. I think ultimately it remains a niche.
You, in your work, you note a difference in terminology between AI porn, deepfake, and
Image-based sexual abuse material.
image-based sexual. Yeah. Could you define the difference and why you're making that noted difference between these different terms?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine when people, although I've started doing it myself because it's difficult to avoid, but AI being this just massive catch-all term. I'm sure that's something that you encounter in your work as well, where it's kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, are you talking about like a generated image? Are you talking about a chatbot? Are you talking about an algorithm? Are you talking like what are you talking about when you say AI? So I do like to be specific when I can be. Um, but something like deep fake, where that's kind of a very specific digital imaging tool or digital manipulation tool, where it's a face swapping um, mechanism almost, and that kind of exists separately from quote unquote AI porn, which usually when people say AI porn, they're referring to generated images. And then what I've been seeing that I find concerning is people sometimes use, for example, the term deep fake porn to explicitly mean non-consensual deep faked porn. So somebody that did not consent to their likeness being used will have their face put onto maybe a performer's body who, in all likelihood also has not consented to that. And that has kind of been making the media rounds as quote unquote deepfake porn, which I find frustrating because there are use cases where there can be consensual deepfake porn. Like that is ultimately, it's a digital image manipulation tool. You can make entirely consensual deepfake porn. So if that can happen, then I have a problem with the term deepfake porn being kind of used almost exclusively in reference to non-consensual content.
One of the things that was very notable in terms of the public reaction to AI sexual generated sexual images. I spent a lot of time on 4chan, And one of the first things they did when the weights were leaked of a lot of the models was make porn. Obviously, it's 4chan. But one of the responses from sort of the general public on Twitter or whatnot was that it was over for adult performers or whatnot. It's a question actually I asked Magdalene Taylor, which is, has AI changed the economy of naked women online?
That's such a good question. I mean, as I kind of referenced earlier, I do personally, as somebody that still, you know, writes porn scripts, I do some production and studio pornography. I do believe that generated content is a relatively niche genre and it's a relatively niche desire, because pretty consistently what people are looking for is, whether they kind of understand it to be or not, some degree of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, just for my own personal philosophy on desire, I think that kind of the stakes of genuine human connection is really what fuels a lot of desire and what a lot of arousal. That said, I think that what we are seeing is people are finding it hard to be able to tell what is generated content and what isn't. And that, I think, is something that is changing the kind of economics of naked women online, because it is kind of blurring the lines of that niche of, and OnlyFans, for example, right now doesn't allow AI generated content, but it is genuinely quite difficult, sometimes, to be able to tell if you're chatting to a bot, if you're using those tools. So I think in that sense, people's ability to tell if they're interacting with a niche genre versus a mainstream genre is changing.
One of the things you've written about is a lot of these very niche fantasies. You mentioned a Weeking 2001, the makes the giantess. Have you seen an intersection between these like very specific desires and AI, or are they still sort of crafted by these singular creators?
What's interesting is that right now, I mean, I think this makes sense, but right now we're seeing a lot of the generated content kind of be the most mainstream, most kind of run of the mill, mass market appeal genre content, like just like hot girls, like really smooth hot girls, which to me is interesting because really I would say kind of the reason why I liked the concept of AI pornography back in 2021 was because of its potential to sort of tap into these really, really niche markets, like, for example, giantess or vor, et cetera, like animated pornography has been doing. I think it makes sense, as given that generated content is new and it's a new genre, and generally speaking, a new genre, or a new medium will kind of like hit the most basic audience first, and then we'll kind of trickle into down, the stranger stuff that I like.
The trickle down freakonomics of it all.
Exactly, the trickle down freakonomics of it all. You get it. Yeah. So I haven't really been seeing a lot of that, but I expect to see it much more in the next, even, I mean, with the rate of things, few months probably. And that will, I think, be really interesting to see. I think that the optimist in me, even though I really am rejecting a lot of what's happening with AI, I still have some optimism of, generated content, artificial intelligence to be used as a creative tool. I think that that's the best way it can be used, is to help people with creative expression instead of completely take it over. So I would like to see more of that.
When you first started to look at some of these AI partners, you did it on the incel.co forum. Of course, involuntary celibates. It seems now that the audience for Replica has moved away from the niche incel community to now the much broader population. In my own research, the number varies, but it's been said that at least 30 to 40% of Replica users are in human committed relationships. What do you make of that statistic? Because, of course, it sort of maybe not contradicts, but is in contrast with the sort of loneliness usual hypothesis behind it.
And for audience reference, I was kind of quote unquote undercover on incel.co for several months as an incel named Keith. R.I.P. Keith. And what I found is that, and this was back in it would have been 2019, maybe even earlier, 2018, was that a lot of the incels were using replica to kind of create a fake girlfriend experience, which I think is how people still use it for the most part. I think that it's interesting. I think that, you know, I don't necessarily think that currently as partnership exists, now it makes people less lonely. I think that unfortunately we've kind of reached a point where this quote unquote loneliness epidemic is deeper and more kind of fundamental and all encompassing than just finding somebody that you like. I think it really speaks to like a deeply profound alienation that people have with their environment and with their surroundings and with their communities, that cannot be wholly alleviated by, you know, having somebody that you fuck 2 to 3 times a week, if you're lucky. Yeah. And so I think that people still are looking for more connection outside of their relationships and are still kind of looking for these tools to fill that.
And the digital seems to be sort of the ersatz or the complement to the human relationship.
And I think that it's interesting that a lot of people feel, it seems, more comfortable interacting with these digital interfaces than they do, for example, maybe going to couples therapy, which I think bizarrely has more stigma tied to it than having like a second online girlfriend.
Did you watch that CBS News report with the guy with the kid and the wife?
Yes, who is in love with Soul.
Soul.
Yes, yeah. I did. I find that very interesting. I think that it's bringing up a lot of interesting questions around boundaries in relationships and monogamy, which has been fascinating, and whether, you know, having a very deep, intimate relationship with a chatbot is cheating. You know, what does polyamory look like in the digital age?
There is actually a paper about this, and they've sort of surveyed people, and a lot of the times it depends on the nature of the exchanges, right? This case was not in the study, so it's hard to determine what they would say. But based on if the conversation is sexual and not in nature, purely emotional, sometimes it's okay. Sexual seems to be a boundary, and I'll probably reference the study in the video. Another very interesting study that I read about this is how by being primed with a flirtatious interaction with a chatbot, people are less likely than flirt with a real human being that is outside of their monogamous relationship. So it actually operates, small sample, of course. There is a correlation between the engagement with a chatbot and you're less likely to then go out of your way and flirt with like a real human
subject. So it's harm reduction. That's what you're essentially. That's very funny. I mean, I think that what's compelling about that dialogue that's happening right now is that it's very similar to the dialogue that happens around pornography and relationships, where pornography is this kind of gray area for a lot of people, where some people feel very strongly that it constitutes cheating, or it violates the boundaries of a traditionally monogamous partnership, and other people see no problem with it and do not see it as cheating whatsoever, and it exists in this sort of gray area of something that people actually really do need to have conversations about, even if they are in the most quote unquote traditional style of relationship.
In 2021, you wrote, artificial intelligence provides a solve for many to process their emotions, developing a safe connection in a safe and relatively risk-free environment. 4 years later, do you still believe that statement?
No, I don't. I don't believe that statement as AI currently exists. I think that I don't trust the companies that control AI. I don't trust how they use data. I don't trust the systems as they are built currently. I feel concerned about how much chatbots, and this isn't new, you know, Smarter Child, Eliza, all these chatbots historically have been built, and this is kind of normalized through many, many decades, to mimic somebody's style of speech back at them. However, seeing that on such a deeply, I guess, successful scale where they've gotten really good at it, I find really deeply alarming. And I think for me, will kind of make people feel even more alienated with the actual world around them. I don't think it's good to have everything you believe just kind of reflected back at you without question. I don't think that that's a safe way to engage with fantasy. Not long term, at least, not if you are hoping to have a quote unquote IRL sexual relationship or engage sexually in the non-digital space. So no, I don't believe that fantasizing with a chatbot is safe.
We have a retraction.
Yes.
Switching gears. How did the category of interracial came to be? You've written about sort of this whole story. I thought it was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Behind the Green Door.
Yeah.
Yes. So interracial, the first kind of widely, I guess, released example of interracial pornography was in Behind the Green Door, which was early 60s, I believe. And it was very controversial. And it kind of created this terminology, quote unquote, interracial, which I have spoken about because something that is this really tricky pain point in the adult industry is categorization. I have worked with a lot of startups that are building pornography platforms, and I've also, I used to work with Pornhub, and a lot of my criticisms of Pornhub when I worked there were with its categorization. And since then, I've helped a number of startups try to build out websites, and how to categorize is quite an interesting, I would say, exercise because we have sort of been taught to navigate porn platforms in a way that I think kind of reinforces a lot of the racism and transphobia that the adult industry is widely criticized for, because so much of categorization has to do with physical attributes of the performers involved. For example, interracial, which is specifically, in this context, really only means a Black man with a white woman, and that is because of its first kind of use in Behind the Green Door in the early 1960s.
I'm particularly interested in how media, specifically now digital media or social media, the languages or the sort of mimetic words that are developed there then seep into our current, not that there's a pure barrier, but sort of in our IRL non-digital interactions. How does porn's classification system affect modern relationships?
That's a great question. I think that a lot of my thoughts come down to a criticism of the lack of kind of media literacy around pornography and media literacy education around pornography. I think that people engage with porn and porn sites regularly. I think people engage with porn sites at kind of key moments in developing their understanding of relationships with people and sexuality. And there is currently essentially no education around porn, around how to talk to people about porn, young people about porn. So what we see is a lot of people kind of just take pornography at face value with kind of very little understanding that it's not real. So these same kind of like systems of categorization that are that can be racist or transphobic or can kind of minimize a performer or a scene or an entire film down to these like base racial categories or genital categories are being applied to how people interact with like real people in their lives as well, which is not great.
With the different companies you've worked with, what is the most original or interesting way you've seen people break out of this categorization? Because I feel like it's even inherited from Carl von Linnaeus, you know, like the famous Scandinavian scientist who gave each species like a different sort of name, the order, the genus, and whatnot.
Mm,
And classification is, of course, always reductive.
yes.
Um,
The kingdom, phylum,
the king,
class,
exact,
order of pornography.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what kind of have you seen any new systems that sort of break this?
Yeah, I think that the kind of newer, more progressive sites are trying to are often kind of categorizing scenes now based on the kind of sexual content, so the position, the dynamic, and it's more about the action rather than the physical characteristics of the performers performing said action, which I definitely prefer to just, base level often racist terminology. However, I don't think that we've succeeded in like I don't I think that there's further we can go in kind of exploring categorization of pornography. Personally, I'm obviously like a somewhat of a porno evangelist, and also I'm a scriptwriter, so I would love to see genre explored more in pornography and pornography being treated as like a legitimate media format that does have genre. That's what I would love to see.
Okay, here's a bold question.
Mm-hmm.
Can desire exist outside of language?
Oh, that's a great question. I think so, personally. I think so based on, I've been thinking a lot about non normative sexuality and non normative desire. And I think that there is a lot of non normative desire that exists outside of language. That's what
Yeah,
I, yeah.
I can think of some of the things you know, vor oftentimes doesn't necessarily have language associated to it because the
No.
characters are just non-verbal or just like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes outside of just the human.
Yes.
Um, yeah. In my book, A Cyber Architecture of Checkpoints, I speak about the importance for digital communities to build their own platform because their presence is usually entirely dependent on the platform's whims. It seems that the situation has been similar in the adult industry. What did you learn from the adult content ban, albeit temporary, on OnlyFans?
Mm, what a time that was. I wasn't surprised by that. They had been threatening that for a long time. They still are. It's very common for platforms to get kind of successful financially, mainstream recognition, and then through adult content, through sexual content, adult content, and then once they've kind of reached that level of mainstream success or financial success, distance themselves from explicit content in order, I believe, the the goal is to reach to a new level of mainstream success that does not carry all of the burden of having politicized content and needing to jump through a lot of hoops with payment processing and all those things. So it would be a lot more convenient if they just sort of cast aside what got them everything in
Yeah.
the first place and screwed over all of the nasty porn people that helped them and got them rich. But so that's very common. We have seen that a lot. We saw that with Tumblr, although obviously that was a disaster for them. I mean, it was a disaster for OnlyFans as well. That's why it lasted, I believe, 72 hours or less. But it's that's very common. I still think that OnlyFans's goal is to eventually rid itself of explicit content entirely.
So part of my own research with the platforms like Archive of Our Own, a network of our own, I talk about also in response to Photolog, Photocumbia, is the users of a platform building their own. Have you seen anything like that happen, sort of an emergent, sort of grassroots movement to build outside of the big platforms, which indubitably will most likely kick off the adult content when it is no longer convenient for them?
Mm-hmm. There have been a few successful platforms that were created by, or, are majority run by, headed by former current sex workers. ManyVids is a great example. The ManyVids CEO was a content creator herself. So that's, I would say, a great example of that working. I would not say it's common. Mm-hmm. There have been many attempts. There continue to be many attempts. I think, frustratingly, the people that are making the kind of money in the adult industry that could fund a legitimately mainstream platform are also the people that are, the CEO of OnlyFans, that feel no loyalty to the adult industry. So I think that kind of creates an issue where the people making the most money from the adult industry also feel the least loyalty to it.
Can you tell me a bit more about what happened to Lex? And what is Lex, first of all, and what happened to it in sort of a similar fashion?
Yes. So Lex was a queer, specifically at one point lesbian hookup app. It was kind of modeled after newspaper personals, like Dyke newspaper personals. And it was really fun. It was all text-based. It was a lot of, it encouraged cruising. It was quite explicitly sexual. And then a couple years ago, they started to do really a complete revamp of their brand. And one of the first things to go was kind of this explicitly sexual edge that it had. And now Lex is a community app for queer friendship and picnics.
I did a little research on it. I saw that it did seem fairly vanilla at this point.
Yes, they really discourage, I would say, through their branding and brand terminology, cruising and explicit sexuality on their app, which is interesting. And it's now really branded to be a non-sexual queer community platform.
Jessica Walsh is an absolute legend in the design community. In what ways do you feel that the design for Lex, which she did with her firm and Walsh, failed to properly represent the desires of the queer communities that were on the platform itself?
I think that Jessica did a fantastic job at representing the desires of a company that wanted to get mainstream seed funding. And unfortunately, you don't really get big funding if you're catering towards the dirty homosexuals, are you? So in that case, I think Jessica did a fantastic job in that. I don't think her goal was to represent the best interests of queers. I think that her job was to represent the best interests of a company that was trying to become very mainstream very fast. And I think she did that.
How is Lex doing these days?
I mean, I clearly have a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
So I
are the girls still on there? Are they?
Not my girls. Not my girls.
Fair.
not the people that I know. Not the queers that I run with. I think that it obviously I'm not going to shit too much on a queer community app, because I do think that obviously there is
so few of them in the first place.
There are so few of them, and I think that it's really important for queer people, particularly young queer people, which I do believe is now that vast majority of the user base for Lex seems to be on the younger side. And I believe in the need for a non-sexual queer community platform, particularly for young queer people. I think that that's fantastic. I think it is interesting that it followed precisely the same pattern that we just identified, where that came at the expense of explicitly sexual queer platform and queer dynamics.
You mentioned in 2023 article that lesbian bars have dwindled from 200 to 24 only in America. have you seen in this same sense digital spaces emerge as replacements? And if so, how or which ones? Or
I think it's really tricky because I think that there have been some that have emerged, like Lex, for example. But I think it's in some ways even more difficult to have an explicitly sexual space online than it is in person, just with how antagonistic platforms or payment processing legislation is towards sex online. So I can't say that, you know, there's been a boom in response to that. I think that kind of across the board, digitally and in person, explicitly sexual space is few and far between.
one of the things that's very interesting to me is how the experience of the lesbian bar or the queer space physically is very unique and very hard to replicate in the digital. Like the even the experience of cruising, of sort of identifying symbols, the body language. These are all things that if you're just in a chat, it's just like very hard to reproduce.
Yes.
And so I think my contention, I suppose, and it's something I love about the work of William Dickey, who we interviewed Matthew Kirschenbaum in a previous interview. Um, there was this sort of poetry digital experience where I feel like they were able to capture the longing of the click is how I call it, like the cursor's yearning in a way that's I don't think modern digital experiences have. So it still feels like just a big wide gap. And you think that in a efficient market economy.
Well, I think that it is interesting because I do agree, and so much of queer culture around cruising, I think, is being lost. Tea room trade is like a really good kind of reference point for how complex that can be, and I don't really think that that art of cruising is being
Passed
shared,
on.
yeah, being passed on, which I think is a real shame because I do think that that's a big part of queer history and queer culture. At the same time, I think that kind of a completely different experience of desire and anticipation exists online that is just in no way similar to the experience of desire and anticipation in person. And I, of course, as you know, an internet porn enthusiast, I love and appreciate both. But the idea that an in-person cruising experience could be recreated genuinely online, I don't personally believe that.
What is algo speak?
Algospeak is it's the terminology that people use to avoid censorship online. So a good example is how I have to say corn instead of porn, and it's humiliating.
Do you have any evidence that it works?
No, none. Zero, absolutely none. It is so, I think that I have spoken about this a little bit when I was on CBC, but I think that there has developed such a culture of fear and mystery online, and I think that works so effectively in getting people to censor themselves, that I don't know if it works. I think that I really kind of fishtail between saying screw it and just saying porn and saying sex and saying eroticism and all these things, and then, you know, letting the culture of fear affect me and saying something like corn or segs. Oh, horrible. It doesn't even sound good in the mouth. But yeah, I think it's just kind of all rumors. It's all hearsay. It's, you know, I'm still my gender on Instagram is still set to man because 7 years ago somebody told me that I would be less likely to be deleted if my gender was set to man, and so I did it. I have no idea if that's true. I haven't been deleted. I don't know if that's because I've set my gender to man. I know I get a lot of knockoff erectile dysfunction medication ads. That's one thing I know for sure.
I don't even get that.
Well, maybe that says more about me then.
Um, what's interesting to me about algospeak is, as you first mentioned, it's self-censoring. Second, it is terribly medieval. Like when you
Mm-hmm.
read like 15th or 16th century romances or epistolary tales, oftentimes because these are being read by many people, they will obfuscate the language.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see a young person on TikTok skirting around a certain word, I'm like, we're back in the Middle Ages, or back with the
I know.
sort of self-imposed Inquisition in that sense.
Yes.
Um, what bothers me about algospeak is how terribly unerotic it is.
Oh, I know. I just said segs. Oh my God, that's horrific. As
Yeah.
a word, it's really it really is disgusting, I
Oh, it's
think.
vile, honestly. Yeah.
It's so vile, and it's also something that I have a hard time with, this kind of like new era of sex, sexuality, eroticism, sex media, is that I'm finding it quite infantile. And similarly, I find a lot of the kind of algo speak terminology around sex and sexuality to be infantilizing, like saying corn, or like saying segs, or like saying, le dollar bean instead of lesbian. It feels quite childish to me, just in how it sounds and also the words that we are choosing to use, in a way that I find just deeply unpleasant and disturbing.
No, very much so. And I think it, there's something repulsive about the juxtaposition of um, puerile speech and sexuality. Um, I haven't seen it yet escape. You know, we talked about sort of the classification escaping to modern religion. I haven't seen it yet escape the digital,
Ugh.
but if my research is correct, at some point it will.
It will. And honestly, I feel like I have not either, but I would be willing to bet that's just because we're old. I'm so sorry. I think it is probably happening. Just we just
About
narrowly
dating
escaped. Yes,
19-year-olds.
exactly.
Um, that was the next question. Have you seen this digital vernacular seep into IRL interactions? I truly hope it doesn't. Um, what sort of worries me also is how this is very much in a world of chosen front facing, sort of you expose yourself, you make a video. As we venture into more and more surveillance, the logic of algo speak is that if I know that every single device that I have around here is recording me,
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly I need to adopt it at all times.
Mm-hmm.
That's also very scary to me, because this fridge doesn't have a computer, but at some point it will. I'm assuming some devices in the bedroom will start to have, and so suddenly you have to start censoring yourself at all times, and algo speak just becomes daily speak.
Absolutely. And I think that that's definitely happening even without those kind of constant surveillance technologies, because um, algospeak kind of reinforces that what you're talking about is shameful in some way or wrong in some way. And we are really kind of creating this culture around something like pornography, which already there is so much shame around pornography. There's so little conversation around it that happens. And if the little conversation that we are happening, or education that is happening around it, it has to be obfuscated in this really bizarre workaround,
Mm-hmm.
that reinforces that this is not something that should be talked about or can be talked about. And I think that that does something kind of really deep in the psyche, where it's reinforcing that shame.
Yeah, I think personally I'm okay with euphemism. I love um when Shakespeare in will use like puns and sort of these roundabout ways to describe something sexual, because you could not say them overtly, but there's an artfulness that to the method here, which I just find very endearing.
Mm.
There's a creativity to it, and it doesn't feel like it's a 5-year-old saying something.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, another horrific example is sewer slide. Why is that what we're doing with that? What a horrific way
To describe something so tragic.
to, yes. And I think that that's an interesting point that you brought up, where I do think that the art of the euphemism is dying. online, and the art of speaking around something is dying. And instead, what's been normalized are these sort of, adjacent words, or words that kind of sound the same but mean something totally different, that become that word through use. But I do think, obviously, Shakespeare is a great example where there is a magic and an art to saying something without saying it, that I don't think TikTok has really grabbed onto.
Well, it's hard because you have 3 minutes on Reels or 10 minutes on
Yes.
Instagram, and no offense to people watching, but people are a little dense
Yes.
on the internet. The nuance is very hard for them to capture.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it difficult to, if you're trying to engage earnestly and try to be heard, and then people are like, what do you mean by this? Or people in the comments asking Grok on Twitter, like, what does this person mean? Well, we're not in an age of nuance. We're not in an age where people are taking the time to understand the euphemisms. And so people are more willing to be direct. And the only way to be direct is to sort of obfuscate the word, and it just creates a terribly ugly linguistic world, which I'm not a big fan of.
I do think you're right in that so much of it does have to do with just pure time constraint, where I know that I come up against this quite a lot in my short form content, but having to say so much in so little, you're right, where I would say the vast majority of content creators don't have time to, take the windabout roads that Shakespeare did. Nobody is getting paid per word anymore. In fact, you're incentivized to say as little as possible, or to say the most that you can in as few seconds as possible, because also you're trying to get something across in the first 4 seconds. Yep. Because ultimately what, the algorithm reinforces and what it rewards is people sharing it, and people, being grabbed in that first moment. And
you gotta have that hook.
You gotta have that hook.
I hate a hook.
I know. And I don't know if Shakespeare had that hook, to be honest. Do you think that he would do well in this, in the short form content era?
I don't know, but I feel enraptured when I hear two houses both like and like a first sentence is always like very strong, where shall we meet again, Macbeth and Ab. I think he starts the plays very, very strongly. That's my personal opinion. Has short form content taken over the porn industry yet?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I will say, I think short form content is another area where pornography was a little ahead of the game. It's been short form for a while, or not as short form as 30 seconds necessarily, but long are the days where most people were watching hour 20-minute long porn films. What has been much more common since 2010s with aggregate sites has been splitting up larger pieces of content, longer pieces of content from studios, et cetera, into these like really bite-sized clips, and uploading them in bits and pieces onto an aggregate site or a licensing platform. So that's been happening for quite a while, which creates its own problems. And now certainly kind of in response to this hyper short form content, or this like kind of scrolling incentivized algorithms, mechanisms that people have gotten used to, there have been a few sites. I worked with Slushy, which is the quote unquote the TikTok of porn, and it operates very similarly to TikTok, but it is a porn site, and there are a number of porn sites that are kind of responding to people getting used to that, for sure.
How does that work with an experience such as sex, which by its very nature, in my experience, is more than 30 or 60 seconds?
Yes. Hey, don't brag. Some people only get 30 seconds. Okay?
No, that's fair. But...
And according to my Instagram targeted ads, that's really what Instagram thinks of me too. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that the adult industry has been, or the mainstream adult industry and mainstream adult content consumers have been kind of coming up against since that normalization of aggregate content, which is that, what would otherwise be even shot as like a fairly comprehensive much longer sexual encounter with context and, you know,
the pizza man cannot arrive in that time. Like
it's just not realistic.
You have to get your wallet, you can't pay, the whole rigmarole.
Drive over. Oh my gosh, he spent like 20 minutes at least deciding on toppings. Exactly. And but instead it's, you know, spliced up usually into just, you know, just the blowjob portion of a longer film would be uploaded as a standalone clip, or, you know, just the last 3 minutes before the cum shot, or, you know, all these things that kind of work as standalone clips, sort of, but you're removing so much of the context around it. And I think that does kind of change people's interpretation of sex and what sex is and what they can expect and what's, you know, normal, and the conversations before sex and all of these things. And but again, for me, that goes back into the desperate need for
the education.
And right now I think a lot of that is being shouldered by the adult industry. And so the adult industry right now is, you know, producing scene after scene after scene that also includes the behind the scenes content, that also includes the consent conversation, that also includes the yes list, no list, that also includes like everything that happens beforehand, that really walks people through the set. You know, I think that the adult industry is really trying in many ways to do this hand holding, but ultimately there needs to be some give and take with these, you know, more mainstream educational kind of figures or pillars. For example, the Department of Education.
RIP.
Yes.
What is curious to me, and of course I can only speak anecdotally. Actually, let me expand that by saying that I just read Vox. It's a book by Nicholson Baker.
I also just read Vox.
Really?
Yes.
Did Root put you on to this?
No, I read it with a friend of mine.
You did the both voices?
No, I just read it.
Okay, because you said I read it with a friend of mine. I assume.
Oh no, we did a book club.
Okay, nice.
Yes, because House of Holes is my favorite book. Have you read that one?
No, is that by Baker as well?
It's by Baker.
Okay, I read The Mezzanine last year.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you gotta read
House of Holes.
Yeah. Okay. So Vox, I loved Vox.
I love Vox.
Yes, yeah. And the context of, you know, the political history is fascinating.
Wait, what do you mean?
It's the book Monica Lewinsky gave it to.
I did not know that.
Yes. Which I was really like, I respect that move. That's
bold.
That's yes. And I loved Vox, but Vox to me, because it's a bit tame in its content, I would say. It's a bit, for me. maybe I'm outing myself here. House of Holes is weirder.
Okay.
As House of Holes is I feel like what Baker wanted to write with Vox.
Okay.
And then it's also it's received mixed reviews. So take this with a grain of salt, but maybe, you know, through many years of gleeful porn addiction, maybe my brain has melted, as so many of my DMs claim it has. But I love it. I highly recommend House of Holes.
I'll do that one next. But notably,
yes,
there's about half of the book that is just they're just engaging with each other, getting to know each other, what one might call foreplay or whatever, before anything sort of even happens or they even like broach the topic. All I'm trying to say is that the nature of desire includes usually a long anticipation.
Yes.
How does that work with short form content?
I think it doesn't. And I think we lose so much. I mean, as a, you know, a professional yearner, I would say.
You and me both, sister.
Yeah. I've put in the hours. 1,000 hours clocked. I'm an expert.
Certified.
Yeah, certified. And I loved Vox for that reason, where I loved the anticipation. My least favorite part
is the ending.
Yes, I was like, I get it. I like skimmed. I'm like, yeah, I know what sex is. Like, But I loved the very, very, very extensive sort of meandering conversation. Yes. And I would say that I found that very relatable, because I think the vast majority of my own kind of sexual relationships have gone similarly, where it's very meandering for, maybe indefinitely. But I loved it. And I think that that's something that's lost through kind of the chopping up of a larger porn film, but also I think we are losing it in these mainstream content platforms as well, where we're not getting the kind of the flavor of somebody taking the long way to explain something, or the scenic route. And I think that that's really too bad. And I also think it's limiting people's ability to be willing to take the scenic route, or understand that there's value in that.
Yeah, I mean, to put it sort of in sort of an impact terminology, the hypothesis oftentimes that young people are watching porn, they learn about sex through porn, and then thereafter reproduce what they've seen into their real lives. Now, the big worry here is that if you're consuming these short form contents with essentially just the actions and no context, what does it mean for the nature of future sexual relationships in the real world?
I think that, from my understanding and from kind of keeping up to date through studies and reports and occasionally histrionic news headlines, it seems like young people aren't fucking at all.
And I mean, our friend Magdalene is on the horse trying to make it happen.
Yes,
but yeah,
I know. I'm going to the talk. Are you? It's on Tuesday. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of confusion around sex. I would imagine, if that's kind of how I grew up in this culture, simultaneously, of very, very short form, very kind of abstracted sexual content acting as the majority of my sexual education, simultaneously with really this kind of post Me Too movement culture of people are very aware of the risks around sex and sexual dynamics, and reasonably so. There are risks in sexual dynamics. There is like a history of violence in sex. But I would imagine that that's very confusing to pair that kind of general cultural understanding, or that conversation that's really relatively new still, with a sex education that's limited to 30 seconds of choking in a cum shot. Like, how do you kind of
coalesce a universal theory of sex from these like little vignettes?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a horrible quilt of Me Too horror stories and money shots. Like, what does sex mean under that umbrella?
I mean, if I was asked I would tell people to read novels, honestly. I think that like the contextualization, the slowness of the literary experience, I think, to me, evokes best the evolution of desire more than even film. Film is still sometimes too fast, in my opinion. But I'm very curious about the development of masculinity online. Something that you've researched. 2021, the incels. You were
Keith,
incel like me.
When I was Keith. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It seems like the movement has grown now. It's expanded. We call it a manosphere. Everywhere from the incel on one edge to the sort of grind set, no fab. There's also maybe somewhere in between the trad movement. What's your lay of the land of the manosphere, and what are the interesting or curious trends you've seen appear in the last couple of months or years?
I'm definitely very interested in nofap as a concept. Originally, because it's objectively a little funny. But I do think it really speaks to the illness of toxic masculinity, of not kind of letting, as you said earlier, not letting anything out. But I also think that, there's so many ways that we see that, of like, not willing to to release sexually, not willing to release emotionally, not
Mhm.
willing to release in all these ways, and believing that the lack of release is kind of what makes you the man in so many ways. But in reality, you know, obviously, when you bottle everything up, things can get a bit confusing and volatile, both sexually and emotionally, which I think we are seeing. And I also think it's, you know, it's very interesting the ways that masculinity has been explored online, with the steak on the cutting board,
Oh yeah, in
with
the woods.
in the woods, in the, and, you know, it's getting very confusing.
Am I supposed to be a CEO or some kind of like rogue fireman and like a tree cutter type person
I
with a
think
plaid shirt,
both. I think you're supposed to be both. I think that you're supposed to be the
Excel spreadsheets in the
CEO.
morning,
Yes, yeah, you're the
cutting down trees in the
CEO
evening?
of steaks. You're the steak CEO in the woods and also in a condo. It's a condo in the woods, and you're the CEO. It's very confusing, I would say. And you're not supposed to jack off at all, but you're supposed to be fucking, but not unless you're married, unless you're fucking a lot, which is good unless it's bad, I think is kind of the short form.
That's
It's
what I
very
have
easy.
on
It's
my
reasonable.
the vanity in my bathroom.
Yeah, in the mirror. That's your daily affirmation. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very, it's just very confusing. And obviously, womanhood has been confusing online and in media, I would say, for a very long time, quite explicitly, as
Well, you guys
shown.
got it now, pat now. Now it's you do the girl dinner,
Yes.
you
We
pay
do the
with girl
girl math.
math
Yes.
in the evenings, e-girl,
Oh, yeah.
in the morning, girl boss,
Absolutely. In the middle, trad wife.
in the afternoon, lean in.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we're never not leading it. It's a lot of tripping happening. Yeah, I think that that's been kind of explicit in media for so long, illustrated so purely and explicitly, I would say, in kind of early mid 2000s girl magazines
Mhm.
like Cosmo, with the, you know, you're not supposed to be using teeth on the blowjob unless it's a little bit of teeth right at this very spot, but not too much teeth unless you have a donut on there, which you definitely should be putting a donut. Like, it's just there's so much confusion around like how to exist as a woman in media, and now seeing that for men is fascinating. Not that it hasn't been confusing to be a man, or the concept of masculinity hasn't been complicated and confusing, but definitely we are reaching a point with everything.
Yeah.
It's getting odd.
I've been waiting for the moment that it's revealed that Cosmo is actually a subsidiary of some kind of like food company, because there's no way there's that much food. It's always
No.
some kind of food item needs to be included in the experience. I'm like, are you guys getting paid by the orange lobby or something?
The grapefruit
Fruit
by
lobby.
big grapefruit. Yeah, big donut, big grapefruit, big pop rocks. They
Big
were like
ice.
big ice,
Ice.
huge
Huge
ice.
ice.
Huge ice. I know. I'm like, maybe maybe this just speaks to
People have
my.
mini fridges in their bedroom, most likely. That's what I can only
You would
imagine.
have to. You'd have to
The
be doing
ice cubes are used.
grocery trips just to maintain the, yeah, the food sex. It's really, it seems exhausting and messy. How many pairs of sheets do you have?
Oh, I'm a plastic, probably is what it
Okay,
is.
yeah, that's true. Tarp. Pure tarp.
Just moss.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's where we get back to our condo in the woods with a steak,
Exactly.
all coming back.
Um, you made some of the first, of course, not ever, but AI
Mhm.
porn in 2020. Thank you, Canada Art Council.
Yes. Thank
One
you.
question. Why?
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 Okay. Great question. I originally made it because I am interested in genre of in pornography. I think I'm again a porno evangelist. Um, I have written a lot of pornography, and the funny thing about being a script writer for pornography is that um nobody gives a fuck. Nobody, it's like truly like the most thankless role in the adult industry is a scriptwriter. Nobody cares. The question I get most asked most often are is like, I didn't know that that was a thing, and are there actually scripts? And I'm like, well, I just told you that I was a scriptwriter, so that would be a very quick reveal if I
Yeah.
wasn't. But
I'll commend you for one thing. Your scripts, personally, I don't think I've seen any, but reading your work, um, you make an effort to add little Easter eggs
I
for
do.
little freaks out there.
Thank you for noticing that. I really do. I do that a lot. And I did that when I was working full time as a scriptwriter. I incorporate a lot of Easter eggs. That was my favorite game. A lot of references. But yeah, I mean, I think that like in order to be a script writer for pornography, you have to like porn so much. At least I love porn, and I think that there's true artistry in porn. I think that I like a number of people that I was working with as a porn scriptwriter got into it because they liked movies. And I don't like movies. I like porn. That's what I watch. And so I really believe in it as this legitimate form of artistry and expression that exists separately from mainstream film and has qualities that mainstream film does not have. And there are reasons to make something a porn film rather than a mainstream film. For example, in pornography, people are a lot more willing to suspend their disbelief to a degree that is impressive almost. If people think that maybe people are going to get naked, they are down for whatever. Like they are down to take a ride. They're down for things to get very silly, very weird. People are just very willing to go along with wherever you want to take the plot, which I love. That's one of my favorite things about pornography. But kind of in having this near lifelong interest in pornography as a legitimate medium of expression and creativity, I think that there is legitimate genres that are unique to pornography. Not just, subgenres of mainstream, not parody of mainstream, but unique genres to pornography. And the goal of the kind of AI porn that I made in 2021 was to sort of explore visual genre of pornography without nudity. So like, is there visual genre in porn when nobody's naked at all, when you can't tell that there's explicit content? So what I did was I took random screenshots from 3 different quote unquote golden age films, so porn films from the 60s and 70s, and I ran them through a generative adversarial system and got it to output new images that did not look, obviously they had no recognizable bodies, but there were distinct visual elements that were consistent. Like, for example, you could tell that a lot of it was outdoors. You could tell that a lot of it was outdoors in the Midwest, which I thought was interesting, which is where a lot of pornography was filmed at that point. So things like that. So that was why I made it, was I wanted to kind of distill visual genre into something that was not related to explicit content. But what I got was AI porn.
I love the aesthetics of GANs. When I saw the image, I was like, I miss that. Everything is so perfect now. Like a mid-journey image. It's smooth. You barely even see anything in the GAN, but there's something so interesting in the machine's attempt at remaking shapes, which is almost like this form of machinic creativity, which I think we've now lost in our desire to mimetically reproduce nature.
I completely agree with that. I think that I no longer work with AI, as I mentioned. I used to do a lot of kind of AI art experiments in 2020, 2021. I tried to do, I actually made a deepfake video in 2018 and in order to find that the software, I got it through the description of a YouTube video that a teenager in Russia uploaded, and then he linked his Google Drive in the description, and I had to go into the Google Drive, and then you could download the code in the Google Drive, and you had to put the code into the terminal of your computer. And that's how you could deepfake something in 2018. And
honestly, dangerous.
Very dangerous. Oh, I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. I was playing fast and loose with
the
my
computer. Yeah.
computer. I have no idea actually how it survived this. I also had bootstrapped it for this specific project. God bless. Apple MacBook Air 2011, best year.
They don't make them like that anymore.
They do not make them like that. And this computer still runs. It's still my primary laptop. But I've been working with this for a long time, also say, and there was something exciting about when it was bad, and there was something good about when it was bad, where it was sort of really working with the, I guess, naked mechanics of the machine, or you could learn about how the machine was doing things through the output, which is what I learned with my kind of AI porn, was that you could see how like a digital image processing mechanic was understanding an image. You could tell, which
was an interpretability to the.
Yes, you could kind of reverse engineer something in a way that was satisfying, and also I think it was fun. It really felt like the machine was a collaborator, whereas now the mechanics of everything are completely beyond our vision, and all we see is this slop. This perfect slop of, you know, what it's created, and it can do it right every time, and that's boring. I don't like it.
I mean, part of the alienation I think we feel towards the AI image is this complete absence of these signs of understanding by the machine, or these little mistakes. When I say give me a guy in front of a building, and just like a perfect white guy with the haircut in front of a building, there's no longer anything particularly interesting in the image itself. There's no artifacts that express any kind of variance or randomness, which I think is ultimately it's a little boring.
Yeah, I also think that the most interesting thing about any piece of technology is the human element of how it's created and how it's used. Always, I believe the most interesting thing of any piece of technology is how it affects human life and how it has been created by human expression. You know, that's always what's going to be the most interesting part. And I think we can really see that kind of that yearning for humanness, to see the humanity in something, because also, you know, even now when everything is so perfect, people aren't like, that's not what goes viral. The perfect image of the white guy in front of a building is not what goes viral. It's always the images that are a little bit wrong in a way that might seem funny, but it's because we like that it got it wrong, because it tells us something. It tells us something about how people are using it, how it was created by people. And I think that we're always looking for the human in something, even if we're interacting with the digital.
One of the things that's the most interesting to me about going on 4chan and seeing how they were using the open source models with the leaked weights was that the pornographic images they were generated were quite grotesque oftentimes. And so I think by virtue of having any kind of power you want to create an image, there is this at least initial tendency to try to break it, try to make the most absurd thing ever. Unclear whether or not that was a purely, let's call it a technical image or a sexual image or some sort of hybrid of both. But that was very interesting to me to see that.
Or I really liked when there was that moment of virality where I forget which generative imaging system it was, but people were realizing that for a second, for maybe a couple of days, they overcorrected on the diversity and it would not make white people. That was incredible.
Yeah, the Ben Franklin or whatever.
Yes, and that was, I think, so fun and interesting because it was human, where it showed the people kind of frantically behind the scenes, like overcorrecting something, and what we're getting is this something that it doesn't quite work.
Well, see, my black pill is that Those were the true images.
Black Benjamin Franklin. You're like, actually,
Black
it
Abraham
knows,
Lincoln.
it knows something.
Something.
Yes.
Let me tell you that much. Um, last question.
Yes.
Why don't you want to kiss at the intersection of art and technology?
Oh, I think that I'm really.
We're all here. We're
We're
all
all
having
here. I
having
know
a
we're
great
all.
time.
Are we having a great time though? Are you having a great time at the intersection
I'm
of art and
having a
technology?
ball.
I'm so glad. I'm stressed
Okay.
personally. Um, why don't I want to kiss at the intersection of art and technology? I think that I am becoming more of a Luddite every day, every passing moment, even. The classic pipeline of very invested AI artist and researcher to, phone bad, even though I don't believe phone bad necessarily, but
Phone's kind of bad.
sometimes phone be kind of bad. So I think that I struggle with maintaining the erotic optimism that I once had towards technology. And now, actually, I think my understanding of eroticism has really gone in a different direction where I am now like a human connection evangelist.
Maxi.
Yes, yeah, I'm human connection maxing, and I advocate everybody to at least attempt to do the same, because I think that the romanticization of technology has not gone where I had hoped.
Mm-hmm. If you have any advice for folks around this human connection maxing, what can they do to improve their lives and leave the Hotel California that is the intersection of art and technology?
Oh, I would say if anybody listening is following NoFap, maybe jerk it. Maybe jerk it.
Damn, you heard it here first.
Just
do
try
it.
it out. Just close the Reddit tab and come in a tissue, and you might feel a little bit better. And then, other than that, I do recommend, you know, I know that it's difficult to connect with people. But I think that so very few people are alone in finding it difficult to connect with people. I think that vulnerability is often, if not always, rewarded. I think people are very open to the honesty of desire and the desire of human connection, even in really small moments, like, if you are in a grocery store line making small talk about the limes, people do respond well to it.
Yeah, I think if I were to, and I think we should stop saying that it's hard. I think we should be like, it's what we do.
Yes.
What we talk about the melons in the fruit aisle. That's what we do.
That's what we do. Exactly. I think you're right. I think that we have kind of created a system of, if we keep saying it's really hard,
yeah,
it's going to be really hard. And I think if we just start treating it as something that happens, it'll just happen. I think you're so right.
And honestly, the first time is it's like I've never done stand up, but I'm assuming the first time is like, oh, well, you don't know what to say about the melon, but the more time you spend with them, the more you develop a keen eye for commentary on the fruits and whatnot.
You're gonna have some go-tos, some quips.
Some quips.
And
make some middle-aged women laugh. It's gonna be wonderful.
Exactly. And also, what I learned from doing stand-up is that even if you bomb, even if the reaction is not what you wanted, you're not gonna die. You can go home and you're gonna be okay.
That is very true. I want to say nothing can kill you, but that's not true.
That's not true. But almost no element of, making small talk in the grocery store line will kill you.
Yeah.
Your risks are low.
De minimis for sure.
Yes.
So do it. Noelle, thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.